All right, today we're diving into some seriously cool small-scale rocket science. This is all inspired by that legendary rocketry book, Ignition. And we're going to tackle a question that honestly sounds kind of nuts. Building a liquid rocket in a test tube? I mean, seriously? But that's exactly what we're going to break down today, a real-world experiment that pulls this off. We're going to get into the powerful self-igniting chemistry that's at the heart of some liquid rocket engines, all done right here in the lab. Okay, so how is this even possible? Well, first things first, let's take a quick look at how most liquid-fueled rockets actually work on a basic level. At the core of it all, you've got what's called a bipropellant system. Sounds fancy, but it's pretty simple, really. You have two separate liquids, a fuel and an oxidizer. When these two meet up and react inside a combustion chamber, they create this huge blast of hot gas. That gas shoots out the back, and boom, you've got thrust. But how they react? That's where the magic really happens. So you've basically got two flavors of propellants. On one side, you have non-hypergolic fuels. These are super common, but they're kind of like the engine in your car. They need a spark plug, some kind of external ignition source to get going. And that means a more complex setup. But then you have hypergolic fuels. And these things are just wild. They're so reactive that they burst into flames the instant they touch each other. No spark plug needed, and you can probably guess which one is perfect for a simple, small-scale test like ours. So for this experiment, the chemical cocktail is pure nitric acid as the oxidizer, and for the fuel, aniline. And here's a cool little piece of trivia for you. Aniline was actually tested as a real rocket fuel back in the day. It never quite made it to the big leagues, mostly because it freezes at -6 Celsius, which is, not great if you're launching in the cold. But for what we're doing here, a quick lab demo, it's absolutely perfect. All right, so we've got our chemicals. Now it's time for the moment of truth. What happens when we actually mix them? The setup couldn't be simpler. Literally, just a test tube. And the first few tries, they were a bit of a roller coaster. At first, you just get this little pop as the aniline hits the acid. Then it starts boiling like crazy as the reaction kicks in. But then, after a short, suspenseful pause, whoosh, a sudden bright flash of ignition. And that little delay, that turned out to be a really important clue that something more complex was happening here. I mean, can you imagine? The experimenter even said they were pretty nervous doing this, and you can't blame them. But seeing that flash of fire, wow, that's the proof right there. It's the heart of a rocket engine captured inside a tiny piece of glass. Absolutely wild. Okay, so we've got ignition, success. But now the real science begins. The next step is to play detective and figure out why it worked that way. Specifically, what was causing that delay before it lit up? First variable to test, the test tube itself. Does the diameter of the tube make any difference? Does a wider or a narrower tube change how fast the whole thing ignites? Time for a good old-fashioned side-by-side test. And the results were, well, they were pretty dramatic. When they looked at it frame by frame, the narrow tubes lit up in about 204 milliseconds. That's way faster, more than a third faster than the wider tubes. So the theory is that the tighter space forces the chemicals to mix together much more violently, which kicks the reaction into high gear. Okay, so we know narrower is faster. Check. But what about the length of the tube? If that violent mix is the key, what happens if we chop the tube down and make it shorter? Oh yeah, it had an effect all right, a big one. In fact, most of the time, it was a total fail. With the short tube, that initial puff of gas was so strong, it just launched the fuel and oxidizer right out before they could even ignite. So, lesson learned, you need enough runway, enough length in that tube for the reaction to actually happen. So, after figuring out the basics of the reaction, it was time to level up. One final step. Could we take a regular old test tube and tweak it to act even more like a real rocket engine? And this is where we bring in a classic piece of rocket engineering, the de Laval nozzle. The design is just brilliant. You've got your hot gas in a wide chamber, and then you force it through this super narrow section called the throat. Squeezing it through there makes the gas go incredibly fast. We're talking supersonic speeds. Then, as it shoots out the flared end, it expands and pushes back, creating a ton of thrust. So the big question is, can you do that with a test tube? Turns out, Yeah, by carefully heating up a glass tube and stretching it out, you can create your own little mini nozzle, complete with a narrow throat. And the result? A much louder, more powerful pop. That sound alone tells you everything. Shaping the exhaust, even on this tiny scale, squeezes way more power out of these same chemical reaction.
So let's recap. After all that fire and noise, what are the big takeaways from our little test tube rocket project?
It really all boils down to controlling the reaction, right? We learned that a narrow tube is key for a fast, violent mix. A long enough tube is crucial to give that reaction the time and space it needs to actually ignite. And if you really want to get the most bang for your buck, shaping the exit like a nozzle focuses all that energy into a much more powerful kick. It's all about that delicate dance between shape, space, and timing. It's just incredible when you think about it, isn't it? That the core ideas behind rocketry can be shown with something as simple as a test tube. It really gets you thinking, what other huge secrets of science are out there, just waiting for someone with a little curiosity and a couple of simple tools to uncover them?